Hi, I'm Sarah. This is Creative Ramblings. Today's video, I am going to show you how to stencil a wood sign. 3 ways to get perfect stencils every time. This video is part of a series all about wood signs. Be sure to check out the first video where I show you how to make this wood palette sign and some tips for staining it. Now that this sign is dry, completely dry, we're ready to stencil it. I am going to show you 3 materials that I use for making stencils. 2 are adhesive, one-time use stencils, and the other is a way to make a reusable stencil that you can wash and use over and over again. Let's start with that one. This is Duralar. I use this to make my reusable stencils. I put it on my mat after I've designed it in my Silhouette software, and I cut it with my Cameo. Now the welcome home part of our sign I've cut in 2 pieces. Duralar comes in a 9 by 12 inch pad. So this is the one part of it that says home. When you are making a stencil of your own, you want to be able to cut something that has continuous lines, so there's not little pieces cut out. So for this font that I used, I cut some different pieces so that everything is all together. This other piece is the first part of the stencil, and it says, welcome to our home. Now for this one, this is not one continuous piece. There's little pieces missing. So the middle of the O, the middle of the L. You can actually still stencil with this. I'm gonna show you both ways to use these. Now the trick to stenciling with Duralar is to get a good stick between your stencil and your wood sign. Now you can use a stencil spray or an adhesive spray. I like to use basting spray. This can be found in the quilting section. It's a temporary adhesive that's gonna help stick our stencil to the sign without leaving a residue behind. So the first thing we wanna do is line up the stencil on the sign. So I'm gonna start by lining up the word home on our sign here. I'm gonna take the basting spray, shake it well, and spray the back side of my stencil. Once it's sprayed, I like to let it dry for just a moment and then put it in place. Basting spray is a temporary adhesive that's gonna hold my stencil in place and give me nice crisp lines for all my letters. Now to add some paint. I like to use white acrylic craft paint for the letters on this. I also like to use sponge brushes. They come in a variety of sizes, and the key to a good, crisp stencil, in addition to having a nice stencil piece, is to use very little paint. Dab it into your paint, wipe it off on the side, and then use an up and down motion over your stencil. Once I'm happy with the amount of paint on my stencil, it's time to peel this off. Now these stencils are reusable. While the paint is still wet on the stencil, take it to the sink and rinse it with cold water. And I have a beautiful word home on my sign. Now that our first part of our stencil is dry, we're gonna add the other part of our stencil. Now you'll remember when I cut this one, we're missing the middle of our O's, but that we can remedy. So I'm gonna start by spraying the back of this stencil with my basting spray, and then putting it into place on my sign. Now, on this sheet of paper here, I have the middles of the letters. And this is pretty simple to attach. I'm just gonna take my basting spray, I'm gonna lightly spray the backs of them, and put them into place. I'm gonna do that for all my letters, and then I'll be ready to paint. So now I'm gonna peel this off, and I'm gonna take a small tool and peel out the middles of these letters that are left. And on this sign, I have yet to do the 2 hour. I'm gonna actually reposition that and do that in a little bit different place. So I'm gonna go wash this stencil. Again, just warm water usually gets it off, sometimes a little bit of soap. Pat it dry, and then I'm gonna be able to come back and using that same method, add the next 2 words in here. All right, there's our finished product. Welcome to our home using a reusable stencil that I cut from Duralar. Another way to stencil a wood sign is by creating a one-time use adhesive stencil. So I'm going to show you two ways to do that. The first way is using vinyl. Now you can take a look at the description of this video for the vinyl that I like to use. You can buy this on large rolls or smaller sheets, and I encourage you to always save your scraps. I make a lot of my stencils using scrap vinyl. So you're going to need some vinyl, and then you're going to need something to transfer your vinyl from your cutting mat to your wood sign. I like to use contact paper for most of my stencil transferring. So once you've cut your design out of your silhouette, pull it off your mat, and this is how I put it on my wood sign. I start by weeding the excess out of my design. Whenever you're weeding vinyl, a good rule of thumb is to pull up the pieces where you want the paint to go. Once all the pieces are weeded, it's time to take this stencil and apply it to the sign. And I'm going to transfer it using contact paper. With the contact paper on top of my design, I'm going to use my silhouette tool to really push it on there and remove any bubbles that are in it. Now I'm just going to trim off some of this excess just to make it fit on my sign a bit better. And now it's time to put this vinyl stencil on my sign. So I start by pulling the paper off the back. With the backing pulled off my stencil, I can now apply my stencil to my wood sign. And again, using that silhouette tool, I'm just going to push it down really well, getting any bubbles out and making a good, nice stick on here. Then it's time to pull the contact paper off. I said this earlier and I'll say it again, the key to a good stencil, whether you're using the Duralar or vinyl, is to make sure that your stain is completely dry. Let this dry overnight or your stencil is not going to stick. So now that that stencil's in place, we're going to paint it. Once your stencil's painted, it's time to pull that vinyl off. You can use a silhouette tool or a tweezer to get the little pieces out of the middle. Another way I like to make stencils is by using a stencil film. This is Martha Stewart's stencil film. You can find a link to it in the description of this video. I like this because it's a lot thinner than vinyl, it's less expensive than vinyl, and it's translucent, so you can see through it onto your wood sign. When I cut stencils with this stencil film, I like to use silhouette transfer tape to take it from my cutting mat to my wood sign. But you can also use contact paper for this as well. I've cut a stencil and now I'm going to weed it out. Now using the same method as the adhesive vinyl, I'm going to use a piece of contact paper to transfer this stencil to my board. Now I take that stencil and apply it to my board. What I do like about the stencil film is it's translucent. Unlike the vinyl, which has an opaque look, this you can really see where you're placing your stencil. And then it's time to pull the stencil off. I showed you 3 ways to stencil this wood sign. You can use Duralar to create reusable stencils, you can use vinyl, and you can use stencil film. Be sure to check out the links in the description of this video to find out where I get all of my materials. And if you like this, give me a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to Creative Ramblings for more simple, inspiring projects. Now the first video in this series shows you how to build this wood sign. And the next video in this series is going to talk about how to host a sign painting party and make this really fun hobby profitable. Be sure to check those out. Thanks for watching.